Hello, everyone. So this is my follow-up video for the election prediction, my post analysis. So my hands are up. I got it wrong. I predicted Harris, even though I was flip-flopping for quite a bit. I was giving as many reasons for Trump, and in the end, I went with Harris. I mean, did I really need to go with anyone? Probably not. I was very much on the fence for a long time. But I made a prediction that was wrong, and I hold my hands up. I do want to, though, say that I want to get beyond my own sort of egoic sort of reaction to getting something wrong and realize that actually there's something more important here. And that is, and you'll see a lot of astrologers now online in the last couple of days, sort of almost like groveling and, oh, I got it wrong, and where did I go wrong? Yeah, we need to acknowledge that, but we also need to acknowledge that we got it wrong. The astrology is not wrong. The astrologer gets it wrong. So we have to get over ourselves, basically. Why it's so important that we consider these things is because we don't want to give astrology a bad name. We can have a bad name, that's fine, but we don't want to give astrology a bad name. So that's why I would seriously consider, and actually I have come to a conclusion here. I will not ever again make a prediction unless I have a chart. In this case, not only did I have a chart for both candidates, we had very good, accurate times of birth for both of them. But what I did here was instead of using the techniques that I always use for charts and make accurate predictions, I didn't use the techniques. I didn't use the simple three-step approach I go on and on about. And because of that, I got it wrong. And I'm going to show you why. If you just use my simple three-step approach, it's very simple that Trump is a clear winner with the astrology. The reason I believe I didn't is because I had a bias going in. And I had a bias for Harris going in. And no matter what anyone said, I was going to stick with that bias. And I was going to look for confirmation for that everywhere. And it wasn't hard to find, by the way, because on the SkyScript forum, you'll see that, twice as many astrologers were predicting Harris. That fed into my bias. I was even looking at media and the blue wave, as it was called, and that was feeding into my bias. And even that guy, Alan Lichtman, who has his 13 keys approach to predicting who would win, and he was predicting Harris. And all of this was just feeding my bias. And I was stuck on Harris, and I was going to find any technique that confirmed that Harris was going to be the winner. Again, instead of using my three-step approach. And even while I was at the Leeds Vedic Astrology Conference during the year in August, I believe, and Vishti Larson, one of my mentors, clearly predicted that Trump would win using different techniques than I would use, but he clearly predicted it, and I wouldn't hear it. I wouldn't hear anything of it. I had it in my mind that Harris is going to win, and that's it. So that's the first thing to know, that we have biases. We have to recognize them. They're not political biases. I don't have any political bias. I wouldn't have voted for either candidate if I was in the US. But we have astrological biases. We have it in our head that someone's going to win, and then we rationalize that afterwards. And by the way, we do this all the time. We really are driven by the way we feel. And I guess my feelings moreover, even though I don't have political affiliations, my feelings moreover were for this hope for this kind of new America in a way, predicting that the first ever female president was elected. I had this kind of idealistic vision in a way in my mind, and that was a bias, essentially, because we initially have a feeling, we don't realize we're doing it. And then that feeds our thoughts about whatever, and then we rationalize, like post that feeling. So essentially, and astrology clearly points this out, by the way, we all have, like, based on the moon is about our feelings. The moon is driving our thoughts more than anything, as opposed to the other way around. We think that, okay, we rationalize things and think about things and think that that's going to affect how we feel. No, it's the other way around. The moon and all the dashes, by the way, in Indian astrology are based on the moon more often. It's the moon, it's the mind on a deeper level, on a subconscious level. It's our feelings, in other words, that dictate what we think, not the other way around. Our thinking doesn't dictate what we feel as much as our feelings dictate what we think, and we rationalize afterwards. So that's a bias. So whatever about political bias, we have our emotional bias, and then we have the astrology bias because we have been told by somebody that, or we see the trends, or a media bias or whatever, like I said. So that was the main thing. The main problem I had was a bias. The second thing is why on earth I didn't use the three-step approach when I had good charts for both candidates. Like there is a good excuse for not getting predictions right when you don't have a chart. When you have this just mundane transits, you're just looking at transits and in general way, you're trying to predict based on that, which is really hard. But when you have a chart, you have the other two things you can rely on. So the three-step approach, by the way, is number one, a chart. You see the potential, the promise in the chart. If you don't have a chart, that's why mundane astrology is so hard because you don't have a chart oftentimes. And even when you do for a country or something, there are many charts you could use, and it's like which one is the right one to use. So first of all, you have a chart. You have a chart. Second one, the dasha has to be activated. Has to activate that promise in the chart. So the first thing is the chart, the promise in the chart, whatever the thing is. The second thing is it's activated in a dasha. The third thing and then is the transit activating or triggering those. So you have to have all three to predict anything is going to happen. And in Trump's chart, it's quite clearly all there, while in Harris's chart, all three quite clearly show to her not getting it. So I don't even have to draw up a chart for you and show you this. I'm going to just say it to you. And this is why I'm saying it's like, first of all, we need to be very clear about our techniques and our system. And this is why this is the lesson I've taken from this. I am never going to again predict when I don't have these three in place. Never, ever again. That's why I'm never going to predict mundane events ever again unless I have a chart. And I'm never going to predict based on a chart unless I have all three in place. So in Trump's chart, all three were there quite clearly. He's in a Jupiter dasha. That's Jupiter dasha. Jupiter in his chart is the promise. The Jupiter in his chart is very powerful, stationing to go direct the day he was born. Very powerful Jupiter in his second host sign, aspecting his 10th sign. That's the promise come to fruition because the Jupiter in his birth chart is powerful and aspecting his 10th house, and then Jupiter dasha kicks in that aspect in his dasha. And then third, Jupiter's transiting his 10th house of career. All three there, Jupiter in his 10th house, done and dusted, he's the winner. I should have just stopped it there and just said he was going to win. Simple as. And then if I'd seen that in the beginning and I just thought, that's it, simple as, all of my biases would be towards Trump, and then everything would confirm that. Granted, because most astrologers were predicting Harris, I would have had to really stuck to my guns there and kind of just not thought about that and, looked at the people who were predicting Trump, which there were quite a few as well. And I'll list all of those below, by the way, the people, the Vedic astrologers, or at least, or the astrologers who used the sidereal that got the prediction right for Trump. But let's do the same with Harris and show that the three-step approach for Harris works as well, but in terms of her losing. So this is where I think I really fell off the wagon. So number one, in her birth chart, she has Rahu very prominent in her first house. Number two, Rahu is the dasha. So it's activated her. She's obviously come to very great prominence. She was potentially the first female president. She is the vice president. Let's not forget that. And by the way, she still could become president. As an aside, she still could become president if Biden isn't there in the new year. But anyway, number one, it's in her chart, very powerful in her first house, exalted according to a lot of astrologers in Gemini. Number two, the dasha is activated. And number three, it's transiting her 10th house. And then you're going to say, wait a minute, doesn't she have all three to predict her win? Yes and no. Yes, in terms of all of those three are activated, but what are we talking about? We're talking about Rahu, the blocker, the Badaka, according to Indian analysis. Not like Western astrology that say that Rahu is everything you ever wanted and it just increases everything and you get everything you want. No, it's actually the block. It's the desire for everything, but it's also the block to getting that thing. Quite clearly, Rahu in the 10th house, her 10th house is creating a block. And let's face it, let's call a spade a spade. She is an outlier. She is an outsider. She was always an outsider. She was a Rahu always. People got offended by that when I posted the video saying that, and that I used the wrong word perhaps, and I said usurper, according to Vedic myth, which implies, and someone correctly pointed out that as well, that implies that she illegally gained power, which is not the case, obviously. But she still is sort of like somebody kind of getting power by another means. Her chart doesn't show power by any direct means, essentially. Let's call a spade a spade. But the problem here is that Rahu, if a blocker, is in her 10th house, and Rahu on its own cannot do anything because it's not a planet. And therefore, you're going to have to show the planet that rules where it is, which is Jupiter. Jupiter is ruler of Pisces, or 10th house. Jupiter, where is it? Remember in Trump's chart, it's in the 10th house, prominence, highest office. In Kamala's chart, it's in the 12th house of loss. Simple as done and dusted. She lost. Rahu in the 10th house, ruler of the 10th house in the 12th house. She lost the election. It's really that simple. I didn't really need to go into anything else except those two charts. There's always so much I could say. I'm not going to say any more now. I just want to maybe finish on this point, and I'm not going to say even that these are my final thoughts, as many people say. It's like my final thoughts on this, and then it's done and dusted, and I'm going to move on and forget about it. No, I'm not going to forget about any of this because that's how you learn. I don't ever have final thoughts on anything. If you make up your mind about things, you don't learn. So let's not keep closed mind about this. Let's keep learning, keep learning, keep expanding our knowledge, and keep refining our techniques and our whatever our techniques are, by the way, because we all have different techniques. And these are my techniques. This is my three-step approach that I'm never going to um, defer from ever again in making predictions, at least. But the last point I want to make is again about that bias where we don't know we're having a bias and we think we're having an intuition, and the differences between a bias and intuition, and essentially why we sometimes have a bias and think it's an intuition, and because we don't have enough knowledge. Essentially, we don't have enough knowledge and expertise and experience doing that thing. And when we do have enough knowledge and expertise and experience, when we have an intuition in that case, then yeah, you can maybe follow that if you have followed all the steps and the systems and you've practiced this over and over again. But if you don't, then it's likely to be a bias because again, you are basically just having an initial feeling you're not consciously having, but you have initial gut feeling about something and then you rationalize it afterwards and then make up all of the reasons why this is what it is. So that's what we have to be so careful of always as astrologers. And I'm always usually conscious of it, but obviously there's times like this time when I'm not. And I quite clearly wasn't conscious of this bias. At any rate, that's all I want to say. If you have any thoughts about that, please feel free to post below. Please keep it astrological. I know that a lot of astrologers are getting a lot of trolling, a lot of hate. You know, I think we have to acknowledge that as well as in terms of the US chart and its Rahu period. That Rahu is a shadow aspect. Like when we project that onto other people, we're seeing the other as the shadow, our own shadow, the repressed aspects of ourselves. So this is what's happening in the US. This is why there's such divide. Let's not continue that divide into the astrology discourse, shall we? It's up to you if you want to, but I'm not getting involved in that because I'm trying to my best all the time embrace my own shadow, that I had a need to be right, that I had a need to make a prediction in the first place is more telling than anything. Why did I have that need? That's my Rahu, you know. I'm embracing that. And so I don't have to take on your projections. So if you have any thoughts that are astrological, please feel free to post below. I would love to hear your thoughts on that three-step approach that I'm now forevermore going to be tied to, loosely tied to, because I don't want to also have a bias around that either. But it does work for me. I have never seen it fail me. And why on earth I didn't use it this time, I don't know. I don't know. At any rate, that's all I'm going to say for now. Hope you enjoyed that. And until next time.